We're now joined by Professor Natasja Holtzhausen-du Toit, Professor for Public Management and Administration and Corruption and Crime Expert from the University of Pretoria. A very good evening to you, Prof. Another grim picture set again for South Africa when it comes to crime. And while crimes of murder and robbery have decreased for that period, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu rightfully said that generally the daily lived experience is still that of fear. Now, Prof, over 5,000 killings in that period, still very much too high. What did you make of these latest crime stats?
Good evening, Martha, and good evening to all the viewers. You know, it remains unacceptable. We cannot be in a country where people literally fear for their daily lives. You know, it's unacceptable. Gender-based violence, crime within our communities. This is not what people signed up for when we went into democracy. I think it just remains unacceptable because crime just seems to be escalating. Although there are some wins, they fail to compare to all the losses that we are seeing.
And speaking of some wins as well, Prof, you know, the minister was saying, look, there is some progress being made if we're seeing a decline in crimes such as murder and robbery as well. But as I mentioned as well, the numbers are still too high and, as you're saying, quite unacceptable. Another big thorn that the police just don't seem to be getting right is the matter of GBV or GBH crimes, as we see an increase in sexual offences too. The minister says these crimes, including child porn and sexual grooming, demand a renewed focus and urgent intervention. Hasn't this already been said before?
I think it's as if it's the same song playing on the radio over and over again. And I think what is really needed is action. You know, put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, because it's the same narrative that keeps on repeating.
Yeah, and also because if we're going to be repeating the same thing, but then still saying that, look, we are prioritizing it, but what the stats show is that the numbers are actually increasing. Interestingly, what the minister also mentioned was that he's fully aware, as we all are, that these crime stats reflect those crimes that have been reported. Many victims of gender-based violence or sexual offences as well don't go and report these crimes. What can the police do to encourage more reports? I think a decrease there is not necessarily showing progress, but also reflects that people aren't going to report these crimes.
I think one of the most important aspects would be to, for example, have increased policing. But then I think, and this is probably one of the most critical areas, is to rebuild trust that we have with the police. Because I think, and also the larger criminal justice sector, because so many people are too afraid to go and report. It could be fear of victimization, so additional victimization in terms, and they've already suffered a lot of trauma, but then also building trust that the criminal justice system will not fail them. But then also I think that within a lot of our communities, it's still not acceptable to speak out. You know, it might be going against our elders, it might be going against social conventions. And we should create that safe space for people to be able to report crimes that has been committed against them.
So not only a safe space within the police stations where these crimes are going to be reported, but also in our communities as well.
Absolutely. You know, community centers, there should be facilities. There should also be psychological counseling available to those that are suffered the whatever was transgression that took place.
Another major thorn, Prof, are police killings. We already have, you know, an issue with not enough boots on the ground. We also obviously don't want to see any more murders, but then police killings are also top there, with 22 police officers who were killed during that reporting period. 10 of those incidents occurred in Gauteng alone. What does that indicate about Gauteng when it comes to abiding with law and authority and police killings?
You know, Masa, I think that in terms of Gauteng, and I mean, we are the economic hub, and it doesn't mean that we are also the crime hub, although statistics do tend to show that. It just means that we are not adequately protecting our police officers. And I think that we also in society have a general loss of respect for the uniform, so to speak, and that criminals would basically do anything and take out anyone that could possibly stand in their way. And I know that there are quite a number of crime fighting initiatives also within the province, but we have to ask the question in terms of, is that enough? And we see that also in terms of what is happening to our community policing forum members being killed in the various areas.
And speaking about CPFs as well, I mean, there's always calls for community members to get involved and help the police, for example, through these local CPFs. But when one looks at the number of killings, and they're seemingly on the increase of not only the police killings, but also of CPF members, where does that leave community participation? Which community member would like to then put their hand up and say, I'll get involved in my local CPF, while they're seeing that in other communities and in their own, CPF members are also being targeted?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen this very clearly. And for example, in Nanda, we saw that in Marimi, here in Shoshontouve. I think it's only the brave, you know, because our community policing forum members, they do it out of, I almost want to say, the goodness of their hearts, because they have a vested interest within those communities. And now people are being killed left, right, and center. And that means that a lot of people would not want to be involved in these structures anymore. And I think that there are also a lot of things that could be done to try and empower our CPF members more, but this also relates then to closer collaboration, for example, with the police, infrastructure problems, but and that would also relate to more awareness programs. I think people, although our members would be protecting us, it's also the responsibility of our communities to showcase that we appreciate them and that we are fully aware of the risks that they are taking in order to protect us. You know, in more affluent areas, people can, you know, afford their own security companies, but not in a lot of our informal settlements, for example. That is not the option. So what would be the option? We can't just have nothing within our communities.
And, you know, as you're speaking of trying to empower CPF as well, I'm just thinking, what measures are there in place to protect CPF members and active community participants who do assist law enforcement? And if there are those measures present currently, are they enough?
I don't think so. So obviously we do find that, you know, once you apply, you have to obviously get your police clearance and you have to have some kind of a relationship with the SAPs within specifically in your area, hopefully within the ward where you would be working. But I don't think there is enough being done, and it wouldn't take that much to create, for example, a safer space for our members, the community policing forum members, especially in our informal settlements, to feel safer. You know, we could use technology, resources. They don't get stipends, for example. You know, there could be companies that could come in. I'm thinking of cell phone companies, you know, providing cell phones with data, you know, a better link. It's almost like having two-way communication. It's almost like the walkie-talkies that we could also have. I just think we don't have enough, and it's clear. I mean, if we see the numbers, and they are increasing in terms of the policing forum members that we are losing.
And losing them to death, but also losing them to those who just simply are deterred by the criminal element of it as well. So, Prof, if CPF involvement becomes too risky What alternative models for community safety can be considered?
Well, we do know that we have, the crime-fighting wardens, the amapanyaza, so that could be one way, but that also means that we need to empower these wardens better. But the thing is, a lot of our community members want to be involved. They have a vested interest in those communities. So we cannot just say we can't have any more community policing forums, because they do have a very important role to play. Despite all of I'm just going to use, it's like not wanting to be a whistleblower, but you have to blow the whistle. So I think that if we don't have that, then we would really have to consider then, apart from, for example, the wardens, more visible policing, so more police officers, more presence within our communities. So often even the police do not want to go into some of these. So I think we will just end up in total chaos, and it would be every man, woman, and child basically for themselves, because then a lot of these illegal syndicates will definitely get the upper hand if we remove our community policing forum members from our communities.
A scary picture indeed, if that were to be the case. Prof, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us and joining us this evening on News at Prime.